Joining us now from Philadelphia is Angela Giampolo. She's an attorney, a legal expert, author, entrepreneur, and an activist. How do you get all that done in a day? We don't know. But for us, she is the outlaw. And Garrett, got the whip crack. So Angela, that's designed for you. Welcome. Good to see you.
Good to see you. Hopefully you can hear me this time.
You're perfect. You're coming in loud and clear. Welcome.
That nice blue background.
Got a good background for Skyping, yeah. So Angela, you come on to talk to us about some things that are happening in the realm of legal and legal issues surrounding the LGBT community. Sometimes it's international. More often than not, it's here in the U.S. You are well known for a blog that you do in Philly. It's the Philly Gay Lawyer, and you just did a piece for the PGN that we're going to kick off with, and that was the notion of having a post-nuptial agreement, which is different than a prenup.
Correct. Hence the post.
All right, the next article.
So tell us about that.
Specifically, the LGBT community, in my opinion, are impacting the way that courts view post-nuptial agreements. So historically, post-nuptial agreements have not been looked upon favorably because why didn't you get this stuff in order before? And so clearly the relationship must be on the rocks and you're looking at tying up loose ends, now. And so for whatever reason, and I think incorrectly, historically, courts have disfavored post-nuptial agreements. But post-marriage equality, for myself and my clients, going back 12 years, I've had gay clients that may have gotten married in Massachusetts in 2000, but they're from Pennsylvania, so it wasn't acknowledged, and they weren't technically married, but they were sort of in some ether out there, legally married, but not really. And a few of us had wind of when marriage equality was going to happen here in Pennsylvania. We knew it was going to be in May. And we kind of had about a week's heads up. And I did 28 prenups during that week because people were like, oh, what do you mean? I'm going to be married? I never thought it actually happened in my lifetime. And so we had marriage equality in 2013 and just federally with Edie Windsor. Then every state did their own thing at whatever year they did. And then Jim Obergefell gave us nationwide marriage equality. But all these people had marriage dates where their marriage may have predated marriage equality, but it didn't become legal until their state or the federal government, allowed it. So it's just been a hodgepodge. And I've done over 50 post-nups where it's like, you know what, I didn't have time to plan for this. In hindsight, I'd like to do X, Y, Z. And Pennsylvania in particular is favoring that.
So could you give an example of it? Because as I was reading this, some of the description I thought, well, it sounds almost like a prenup. Could you, is there a subtle difference between a pre and a post?
Only if something may have happened during the marriage. Let's say I choose to forego car insurance and I didn't tell you and I got into a massive car accident.
That's a problem.
And there's a massive judgment against me for $190,000. And I want to, or even a windfall, not necessarily negative, but maybe a windfall, or maybe you started a business and it took off and you're the next, Steve Jobs, but you never even imagined that pre-marriage and you have business partners. I do this a lot with real estate investors where they buy a bunch of properties with another person. And if I get stuck in a divorce, then all of my assets are in that divorce and my poor business partner, our asset is stuck in that. And so there's a caveat to that saying that this business asset is not included in marital property. But I would say the most important difference is, especially recently, now that we've had marriage equality for a while, I feel like post-nuptial agreements are actually preventing divorces. So a lot of people come to me in fear and they say, I don't know if I necessarily want to get divorced. I don't know if that's where I'm heading, but I have 4 properties. I have this, I have that. I go to bed at night wondering if I'm going to get the shirt stolen off my back, and it doesn't allow me to focus on my relationship.
Angela, is when you are doing a post-nuptial agreement, the example you just gave, I'm curious about, are you usually sitting in front of the couple, the 2 people, or are you usually dealing with just one half of the partnership?
So usually one will contact me on behalf of both, and I have to let them know that I can only meet and represent one of them. And then they choose between them who's going to be the point person and who I'm going to deal with. But ethically and from a conflict standpoint, just like a prenup, as far as a post-nup goes, I can only represent one of them.
Okay.
I put in the margin because you mentioned infidelity.
Yeah.
And as I put in the margin, the Jerry Springer clause, because you always hear, if you do it again.
If you do it again, yeah.
So my other question about the pre and post-nup, Angela, is traditionally when you get married, a couple gets married, gay or straight, aren't the assets that were acquired while you were together part of any sort of breakup if it does happen without having a pre or a post-nup? And is that why you're saying you want to protect yourself then?
So two things. So the other part of that article that I get into is LGBTQ individuals tend to get married later in life, right? I just got married. I'm 38. I own property. I'm 38. I'm not 18 with nothing, and I need china and a coffee maker. I'm good in life, and so I'm protecting what I've already accumulated. But so the date of marriage, whatever M day is, date of marriage, whatever assets you have going into the marriage are technically yours, except for the increase in value until D-Day, divorce day. So if you have a piece of property that's worth $100,000 on marriage day, but it's worth $400,000 on D-Day, then $300,000 of that is considered marital property, and then including anything that you've accumulated during the 12 years of marriage.
Together, right? Yeah.
Together. So your 401k going into the marriage, your pension, anything that can increase in value, all of it, everything that you own that has your name around it is marital property. It just gets messy because it's only the increase in value.
But if you said in a post-nup or a prenup that if I had a 401k or I own stock or I own property, and should we unfortunately separate, that stuff's not, could you write in that that's not to be included in anything?
Absolutely. What's mine is mine. What's yours is yours.
Okay.
What we choose to buy jointly is joint, and we've made that choice. That's like
I got the
basic.
401k. We'll split the sofa.
There you go.
All right, Angela, thank you for the article, which is in the PGN.
Well, and the big sort of caveat to all of this is every single married couple has a prenup or a postnup. It's whether or not you and your partner took the time to write it for yourselves, or you let the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania or the state of New York or, God forbid, the state of California write it for you, because they're meant for nobody. People come to me and they're pissed off about a cell phone contract. The breakage fee is $350 on your AT&T bill. Your breakage fee on a marriage is not $350, but people will marry without a contract. But your cell phone bill has a contract that you can break, and it's only $350.
Yeah.
So it just, think about it and own it and do it for yourself.
Are you married?
She just,
I am.
Yeah.
Do you have a prenup, postnup?
I do.
She's a lawyer.
Free.
I know. Just want to check.
Of course, I knew I'd be asked this if I were to write about this. So yes.
I can't believe Aretha Franklin didn't even have a will.
It depends on
I
what
know.
people do.
Yeah.
All right, so thank you for explaining that, Angela, and I think you clarified that very well. And as I'm sitting here, I'm thinking a lot of people who are listening to this probably are saying, not a bad idea to maybe think about.
No, you need to have one. Yeah.
Now, the next item that we were going to discuss with you revolves around Health and Human Services, the Justice Department, of course, the Trump administration, and their desire to basically use the law to eliminate an entire class of people, which are the transgender community, by stating that gender is the biology you were born with, not the biology you represent as. What is your take on all this, and where this could lead to?
Well, obviously, no, we're good. And it's important to note that it's not just, the transgender community. There's a lot of people that just don't identify, either non-binary. And so currently the statistics show 1.4 million people within the U.S. identify in some way on the spectrum where they wouldn't want to check the box, male or female. And just 2 days ago, you had the Netherlands come out with their first 4-gender passport. I mean, so to say that we're going back in the dark ages, and as far as, where this is going, it's scary because as an administration, I thought that they had done the most that they could do, right? Reeling back any progress we had in Title IX in schools, health and other healthcare, being able to have sex reassignment surgeries covered by Medicaid and Medicare, all of that being rolled back, but down to putting gender in the law for the first time in the history of our United States. Gender has never been inscribed in law. It has not been law that gender, male, female, is based on the biological sex that you're born with. This is just a whole new level. It's a whole new level. I honestly, the slippery slope, I can't fully grasp even at the moment.
So is this something that would have to go before Congress, or is it just something he could simply have the Justice Department implement?
Honestly, I think it's something he could just implement as opposed to the birthright situation. Hillary Clinton, when she was Secretary of State, was able to just implement that passport, that your gender could be changed on your passport. Right. Just as Secretary of State, she was able to unilaterally do that. So that's my only frame of reference, really, as to saying that I think he can do that unilaterally, because she did very similar progressive things around gender that were trans and non-binary in terms of passports, which is one of our most important federal documents. So if she could do that unilaterally, I feel like he can do this unilaterally.
I'm somewhat naive to the non-binary descriptor. And as you mentioned, well, you said 1.4 million people in the U.S. identify as non-binary. Mm-hmm. How do they, because we're by far not the most enlightened country or society with this, how does somebody who's non-binary then get a license or function when it asks you for gender on an application? Do they just say do not answer? Or because don't you have to when you go? I mean, even in Philadelphia, right? When you used to have to go get a SEPTA pass, you had to identify as either male or female.
Right. Yeah, that was the big controversy a few years ago, is with what SEPTA did. But unfortunately, yes. I mean, Philadelphia specifically, and hopefully in the next 3 months or so, will be changed within Philadelphia. The mayor and the LGBT commission are working on changing that. So as a country, we may not be most enlightened, but Philadelphia, we're definitely a haven within a hell, I like to say. But so most people, though, you just have to pick the lesser of two evils and go with the one that, hopefully will lead to the least amount of discrimination, towards.
So it can function, right? I mean, yeah.
Yeah. But in other Canada, the Netherlands, the Netherlands is the first to do it with passports, but other countries have a NA, to your point, I don't want to choose either.
So Angela,
to go back to post-nups, I did my first prenup with a gender non-binary, and I had to use they all throughout. Wow. And then you say they, but it's not supposed to change the plural of the verb. And I mean, as a lawyer and reading contracts and the enforceability of it, I feel like the law needs to catch up, because I felt like, the enforceability of that contract was sort of it was shaky, because it said they, but there was no they. It was one person, and why they, and so looked at 20 years from now. So I put a bunch of footnotes all throughout that they was defined as XYZ, because it just didn't read the way that I needed to, and the law's not there. Yeah, and I needed it to be read 20 years from now and still make sense.
The common use of that language would be, they, as we understand they, and when we read it. But Angela, referring to the slippery slope you talked about with the very first time our government or our country would define or codify or define gender, I suppose that no one is really looking down the road, especially not the Justice Department, at all the different lawsuits that might pop up by doing what they want to do, and then it's going to start coming in conflict with individuals, with institutions, with schools, public buildings, private corporations. I mean, it sounds like it's a mess to me that you would ever want to tackle this or do what they're doing.
I mean, hopefully being in the midterms in 2 years, if things change in the administration, then all of this will be rolled back. I think the lawsuits I know the lawsuits will start. ACLU, Lambda, we've already had discussions. The lawsuits are underway because you just have to. The damage has been done right now, or is being done right now, so you have to put your placeholder in. But hopefully that it can be codified, but it can be taken back. We already know now, 2020, we're not going to be counted in the census. So we got counted, once, and in 2010, and now 2020, we're not. And to lose 10 years of statistics,
Yeah.
I mean, the census goes towards budgeting and allocating funds towards those people who need it because the census shows. So we're already not going to be in the 2020 census as is.
John and I had this discussion at lunch, and we referenced it a little bit earlier, but what do you think's behind all this?
Oh, all this in general? I thought there was another word.
No, I was just going to say, what do you think's behind?
Pence.
Because there's so many other things as a country we need to tackle, and
I think it's
we're worried
Mike
about
Pence.
caravans and whether someone was born with a penis or not. I mean, is this a religious thing, or is this because that's where kind of we came down on it. We thought it was somewhat religious based, and maybe Pence was involved, but it just seems to be like such a unnecessary road for us to go down.
The one thing that I can say about Trump that if I were to respect or admire anything is that the people he's made promises to get him where he is, he wants to make good on those promises. And Mike Pence, not to tip the hat on what our third topic is, but Mike Pence, gay or straight, if you cannot give birth, it is against God's will for you to use any other means to do so. And he doesn't even think that should be a thing, and there should be no government funding towards any sort of IVF for, even if you're straight. God made it so that you cannot have a child. All HIV and AIDS funding, he wants to go towards pro-life stuff. So Mike Pence has been very dutiful, very silent, very much the footman soldier, and this is very much his agenda. I mean, I think Ivanka Trump just is turning over in her early grave while awake. I mean, she just has his daughter who lives in New York. I mean, Hillary Clinton was at Trump's wedding. I mean,
yeah.
This is just such an about face that really has nothing to do with his administration so much as the people behind him, the stakeholders that have asked for certain things and he must deliver.
Yeah, I'm with you, Angela. It's definitely the checking off the list and making sure that everybody that supported it gets what they want out of it. And unfortunately, the Christian right, and it's funny to put those two words together, Christian and right, because this is very Christian wrong.
Right.
But
that's
moving
a T-shirt, Tim. John, that's a T-shirt.
Christian wrong.
Christian wrong.
Angela is a business here. The last piece you brought to us, I think, is interesting. And it comes to us from Europe, and it's basically that two lesbian mothers both carried the same baby.
Well, not Europe. They're from Fort Worth, Texas.
Oh, they're from Fort Worth, Texas, and it was part of an.
Like Europe.
So it was through in vitro fertilization, IVF, and one of the women carried the embryo originally, and then it was put into the other one to go to full term. So they're both technically the mothers, right?
Right. So, and we've had, so this is the first ever, right, that's ever happened in the world in this way. But we've had it happen in other ways where, let's say, we put my egg and my wife's egg both in me and see which one attaches. And so I give birth. So the embryo went inside me, and the sperm is inside me, and the baby develops inside me, and then I am the gestational mother as well. I give birth. But instead, they used one mother as sort of almost like a surrogate, if you will, for two gay men, right? But instead of that surrogate being the surrogate that also gives birth, they then shared that role with the woman who ended up giving birth. So the DNA is the one of the surrogate, and then the gestational mother is purely the gestational mother, but she got to experience the 9 months worth of pregnancy and carrying and speaking and singing and classical music, and they have a bond unlike the DNA woman does. That I've seen interviews since, and the one that gave birth was worried that because it had the other's DNA, that she wouldn't feel as attached to the baby, but really the baby is like obsessed with, the vehicle that brought him alive.
So
from what I heard, the doctor said that it costs less than traditional, which is key. And then from my point of view, my adoption fees, an estate plan and a second parent adoption is $5,000. no adoption necessary. They're both mothers. No adoption necessary, and the IVF procedure was less.
So how can that? So how do you go over that hurdle then? You're both being mothers.
Like, how do you explain that? Yeah.
Are they both on the birth certificate? I mean, how is that?
Well, they're both on the birth certificate now,
Right.
by virtue of being married. But so let's say we did it the traditional way, where I give birth and it's my embryo, my egg, and a random sperm, and then my wife is not in any way legally attached to that baby. She's a step parent by virtue of being married to me.
Right.
We're married. It would be like if we met and the baby was 13. No different. It came out of me, and she's not in any way biologically attached. So what I do all day, every day, is I do the adoption of the one that is not biologically related and did not give birth. But no matter what, by virtue of being married, they're both on the birth certificate. But I have another article we can discuss, which is birth certificates are not decrees of parentage. Only an adoption can do that, or this new, really interesting double mommy way.
Yeah, it's fascinating because when you sent us the article, you're right. A normal IVF procedure costs about $30,000. This was about 15. And it's just fascinating to me. And
then no adoption fees.
Yeah, and my mind went right to what you were talking about, which is because of they both shared biological components and necessities for this birth. You would, if you heard the case all the way through, and you patiently, it was laid out, you'd be like, they're both the mother. I know that they are by virtue of marriage, but also by virtue of the biology of it, it's kind of fascinating to me. It really is. And,
Yeah, I just was wondering, do you think it's going to be common?
It's the first time ever in the world, but to John's point, this was not in Europe. And I just got back from a conference in Fort Worth, Texas, and I was in the hotel room, and CNN was on, and I was like, oh my God, am I in Texas? And IVF between lesbians is interesting. I wasn't paying attention. I didn't realize it was like the first time ever in the world, and I was just offended by being in Texas and having just IVF between two lesbians being newsworthy. And then I started listening and realized how they did it differently. And being that they're in Texas, the doctor is getting a ton of hate mail, hate phone call. What are you doing? And she was on the news, and she said, you know what? Anything that brings about more life and within love can't be wrong. And all I did was bring about love in a way that would strengthen the relationship, because to John's point, both feel invested. It's not like one just swiped a credit card for 30 grand to bust out a baby. They are both in some way invested biologically and emotionally. And I think that'll help the relationship moving forward. And obviously the baby's born in love. So I hope it does become more common.
Oh. Well, thanks for joining us. 3 great stories this week. And
thank you. And we had no audio issues.
I know, it's good.
the gremlins stayed away.
So it's our Outlaw segment with Angela Giampolo. Oh, there it is.
I want my caricature, John. Where's my caricature?
We got to do a caricature, and it's got to be like a Indiana Jones kind of thing.
Now maybe a Fort Worth sort of theme.
Yeah.
And you can learn more at giampololaw.com. GIAMPOLO. Did I do it right?
I've been called worse.
Yeah. And of course, you can always find out. We have Angela's picture on our Facebook page, which is Focus Group Radio. And of course, the audio of this broadcast will be posted on Saturday mornings as well. So thanks for joining us. Happy Halloween.
Oh, yeah, the gay high holy day. I can't believe we haven't discussed it. I'm going to be Elle Woods from Legally Blonde with my little chihuahua.
Are you, what's your chihuahua's
I'll
name?
send you photos.
Did we ask you what's your chihuahua's name?
Nico. It used to be Chico when I adopted him, but I thought that was rude. So I renamed him Nico.
Okay. My little guy, Spike, he's got a little bat outfit. But he'll be good. So, hey, thanks for joining us, Angela.
Thank you. You guys rock.